Hello everyone, my name is Mowad and I chose to do my final project on transgender transformation in collegiate student athletes with a focus on one recently famous NCAA Division I swimmer, Leah Thomas. As a Division I female swimmer, I find this topic to be not only interesting to me, but to college athletes everywhere with the increasing amount of members of our community suffering from gender dysphoria. The purpose of my research is to investigate not only the biological aspects of transformation, but also the rules and regulations that allow a transgender to be able to compete in sport. So just a little bit of background, Leah was formerly known as William Thomas. She committed to swim for the University of Pennsylvania class of 2021 as a male and began her transition sophomore year in May of 2019 using hormone replacement therapy and came out as a trans woman to her coaches, friends, and entire team. She was required to swim for the men's team her junior season, then took a year off from school and swimming during COVID to maintain her eligibility. This allowed her to swim for the women's team this past senior season with over 1 year of hormone therapy and no surgical interventions. In March of 2022, after winning the women's 500-yard freestyle, she became the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA Division I national title in any sport. The University of California provides us with what is known as the Transition Roadmap. The first stage is to investigate one's gender identity through internal self-reflection, support organizations, or engaging with a specialized gender dysphoria therapist. Once that is complete, a series of social, medical, and surgical changes may begin. There are requirements for a behavioral health evaluation prior to medical changes, as well as a 1 year full-time presentation in one's chosen gender identity before surgery. The social aspect entails having your gender revealed in public using one of the methods listed to the right, coming out to friends, family, and other members of the community, and changing legal papers to match one's preferred name, gender identity, and pronoun use. The medical or surgical aspect includes GRS, hormone or speech therapy, hair removal, speech surgery, and fertility preservation of the sperm or egg. GRS procedures tend to have very high complication rates, which is why many people elect to complete non-invasive interventions while keeping their anatomy intact. The two purposes of GRS are to build a perineogenital complex that is either feminine or masculine in appearance, and if wanted, appropriate for receptive intercourse. Exogenous testosterone for transgender males is used to suppress female secondary sex characteristics and masculinize transgender men. There is some degree of feminization that has occurred during puberty, which is irreversible. As a result, many transgender men tend to be shorter, have a more feminine fat distribution, and have wider hips than biological men. Exogenous estrogen therapy for transgender women aims to feminize them and suppress male secondary sex characteristics. Estrogen alone is frequently insufficient, so additional anti-androgenic medication is suggested. Hormone treatment enhances the quality of life for transgender people. Serotonin reuptake transporter expression has been found to be lower in people who suffer from serious depression, something often diagnosed in patients with gender dysphoria. Studies have shown the effects of hormone therapy on SERT binding in trans people have increased. Additionally, both subjective stress and cortisol levels drop dramatically, as they are normally extremely high during the process of transformation. Gender-affirming voice care entails therapies to assist transgender people in adapting their voices to create communication patterns that fit their gender identification, as well as nonverbal communication patterns like body language. The NCAA Inclusion of Transgender Student Athletes Handbook is a series of rules and regulations that transgender athletes must abide by in order to compete with and against their identified gender. The following screenshot from the handbook identifies the main rules regarding eligibility as it poses a question with regards to banned substances and mixed teams. In conjunction with NCAA guidelines, athletes of all levels are to abide by the WADA Athlete Biological Passport, which tests athletes based on 2 biological modules. The hematological module collects data on blood doping markers in order to identify the usage of banned substances in the prohibited list, as well as methods to improve oxygen transportation. The steroidal module collects data on steroid doping markers in the urine, seeking to identify endogenous anabolic androgenic steroids, as well as other anabolic drugs listed in the prohibited list. It is also useful for identifying samples that have been manipulated or exchanged with urine from another person. According to many sources, Thomas has complied with all transgender regulations in order to be allowed to participate in NCAA swimming as a woman. Yet there is still major controversy over her eligibility status due to the double-edged sword effect on women's rights in sport and transgender rights in sport. On one side of the debate, people argue that allowing transgender and intersex athletes to compete in women's sports will drive women out of sports altogether, because it is equivalent to having men compete against them. While those on the other side dismiss anyone advocating for anything less than full and unconditional inclusion as a transphobic, racist, or bigot. A series of trans athletes' personal narratives mention that despite media attention, there is a lack of research concentrating on these experiences, as well as any meaningful theoretical study of them.
Realizing and accepting the fact that I was trans, that sort of sense of certainty and comfort that swimming had always given me was sort of thrown into question. And so that was a very difficult experience. But in continuing to swim after transitioning has been an incredibly rewarding experience, as I can continue to do the sport I love as my authentic self.
I personally would be accepting towards the trans female on our swim team. However, I don't think that they should be allowed to compete with and against females, and specifically with Leah Thomas's case, I don't think her record should stand either, mainly because, she still has the anatomy of a male. He was ranked 564th, and then, in the female division, holding records and winning.
I would be supportive of having a trans female athlete on our team, because I think it's really important to understand the struggle that trans Americans have gone through. Also, as an athlete, if you work hard and you follow the rules, there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to compete. And that kind of goes into Leah's records being counted. I think it's important that her successes are acknowledged, and obviously people are going to have different views on what that can be, but I think she followed all the rules and she deserves as much opportunity as other athletes, since she does the same thing.